Of note and or ground rules. We have Caleb Ledoux here from Channel 18, who is recording this for posterity and future broadcast. So please be aware that we do have the camera going. We're not broadcasting live this evening. We don't have those capabilities with all the other meetings that are going on. So we're going to try this presentation without a microphone. At some point, Caleb may tell me we need the microphone, but I think we're good for right now. So with that, I'll get the presentation going. And thank you for joining us this evening at our forum on community and affordable housing. So I started out with this slide first because before we talk about who we are, I thought it would be helpful to find out what the trust is. So we are 4 of the 5 members assembled that are the trustees of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we're a board of trustees that has a fiduciary responsibility. And the purpose of the trust, as you can see here, is to provide for the preservation and creation of affordable housing in the town of Harwich for the benefit of low and moderate income households as defined by the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development. So I will lapse into government speak, and we refer to that as DHCD. So the state agency that deals with housing. So that's the purpose of the trust, and we are the sponsors of this evening's event. And so I'm Joe Powers. I'm the town administrator for the town of Harwich, and by that role I also serve as the chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. We have Don Howell, who is the selectman member of the Board of Trustees. However, Don is not able to join us this evening. He's a little bit under the weather, but he is there, and he is there to represent the Board of Selectmen. And now I'll turn it over to my colleagues, now that they've sat down and are comfortable, if they could stand up and introduce themselves and tell you who they are.
Judith Underwood, one of your trustees, and also one of your water wastewater commissioners.
My name is Larry Brophy. I'm also on the Affordable Housing Trust as a member, and I have been on the planning board in Harwich for 10 or 12 years, and prior to that, a city planner in Boston and various other places around 2 countries for a couple of decades before that.
Brendan Lowry, I'm also on the Historic Commission.
Thank you, folks. And what they're not telling you is part of the reason why they're also on the trust is beyond the experiences that they mentioned, each of these folks has a background and experience either in advocating or actually developing housing or commercial and other projects. So we rely on these folks because Selectman Howell and I are there by virtue of the positions that we hold. Not to say that we don't have additional skills to bring to it, but these 3 folks are the representatives of the general public, if you will, and folks that have some great backgrounds to help bear on the things that the trust needs to get into. Now I'm going to go through the slide deck this evening, and my colleagues are going to help me with some of the commentary. We'd like to go through some of the slides to give out some of the words and definitions that we work with on a regular basis, and as we go we'll be adding information, and at the end we're going to open it up to you folks. That's not to say we won't take questions. If you have questions as we go through, we'd certainly love to hear from you. But the purpose of this is to give a level set of the words that we've been using to move our progress on affordable housing in Harwich. And we want to see that if those words resonate in the community. And at the very end, you'll see a slide that simply asks, what do you think? And so what we hope to get out of tonight is a dialogue and a conversation that as you folks give information, we've got the town purchased 3M, I'm very proud of this, 3M post-it note over there on my left so we can scribe any of the information that we get. As we go through the slides, I'm going to make reference to some of the maps and parcels that we have. But that was the hope for this evening, and to give information, to give an understanding of the words and the definitions that we operate under as a government organization, and then most importantly to get your input. So with that, affordable housing. So you'll notice in this instance I've said affordable housing, capital A, capital H. And that's a way of distinguishing when we say that, and when I say we, it's not just the trust, it's other folks that work in government and it's other folks that are in the space of affordable housing. What's meant by that is that's meant to be a legal term, an act of government that leads to a specific conclusion, or outcome. And there's a couple other words that are going to relate to that. But I say that because many times I hear people talk about affordable housing. Same phrase, but lowercase letters. And what does that mean? And that's a more nebulous conversation. Affordable is, what does affordable mean to you? Without any of the government metrics that we use, or what does affordable mean to somebody else? So again, we've got capital A, capital H, and that drives some of the activities that we have to do on behalf of the government of the town of Harwich, but also on behalf of the trust to utilize that to the benefit of our fiduciary responsibility to impact upon the housing needs in our town. You're going to hear workforce housing a lot. In fact, in 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be at special town meeting. Hopefully everyone here will be there. But at that special town meeting, one of the articles that the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee are considering is an article that talks about potentially acquiring land that may be used for the benefit of workforce housing. So as I've been evaluating that with staff and legal, the question came up, what does that mean? What do we mean by workforce housing? And one of the interesting comments that I heard was from an attorney who said, well, whatever it means, it doesn't have anything to do with affordable housing as you know it. And as I get into some of the other terms, I'll explain more what that meant, but that was a revelation for me. So when we hear workforce housing, we're going to define it in a specific way tonight, but it's one of those challenges that we wanted to offer to the community. When we use that phrase, what do we mean? I know what I think I mean. Do you know what I think I mean? And do I know what you think it means? And so that's one of those simple phrases that as we do our work, we want to make sure we've heard from the community and that we're all working from the same concept of what we mean by workforce housing. Subsidized housing inventory, capital S, capital H, capital I. Subsidized housing inventory goes back to that statement about Mass Department of Housing and Community Development. Generally speaking, and now I want to say that because I'm not an attorney, I do not want to pretend to be one on recorded device, and I want to tell you that this is my best understanding. I will also rely upon my colleagues or anyone else to help correct or amend the record. But as I understand it, subsidized housing inventory is an inventory kept by the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development for every municipality in the Commonwealth. And it ties back to the general laws known as Chapter 40B. Now, when 40B was first established, some folks referred to it as the anti-snob law. And 40B talks about the types of developments, subdivisions and things like that, that can be developed. When you have a development project under 40B, there may be units available that are affordable housing. Capital H, capital A under the definition. Town of Harwich presently has 5.4% of its available housing as affordable housing under that definition. So again, our subsidized housing inventory with the most recent numbers, which are expected to be updated this fall, from DHCD is 5.4%. Under Chapter 40B and under the operations of DHCD and other state agencies, there's a magic number, so to speak, and it's 10%. And so the concept is, it's not a requirement or a statute, but it is something you want to achieve. Generally speaking, when a municipality can have more than 10% subsidized housing inventory on the books, a town may have greater control, air quotes, over Chapter 40B. I put that out there because that may become or may be a goal of the town of Harwich through the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, other groups, or town meeting. So we need to be mindful of those phrases because it will impact upon what we consider to be affordable housing for our purposes, but affordable housing for the subsidized housing inventory. Beyond that, we have an action plan. You'll see in a future slide that this is not our last community engagement. It's our first in 3 years, thank you COVID, but it's not our last, and in fact we're going to have another one later on this fall that I'll talk about later this evening. And the purpose of that is to work with the town's consultant through the trust to develop an action plan. What the trust is going to work on over the next year, 2 years, and 3 years to move forward on the topic of affordable housing. Low income. When you talk about affordable housing, of course you talk about income. There's the concept of low income. There's the concept of moderate income. What is that? Again, left undefined, it's a subjective phrase that could mean different things to different people. In a moment, you're going to see how we explicitly define low income, moderate income, and how that ties back to affordable housing. So we're going to have some definitions. Before we go to the definitions, I want to turn to my colleagues and see if they wanted to add any of the commentary to the last slide about definitions while I take a break. Cheers, thank you. So, as members of the trust, these are the working definitions that we have. And yes, I didn't put it on notes view, so I'm going to have to look up my footnotes, but the footnotes tie back to definitions that you see there that are derived from other government sources. So as you can see up here on the board, and I'm going to turn slightly to get out of the way so I can read my own notes. So when we talk about, we the trust talk about low income refers to a household earning up to 50% of an area median income, and the area in question for us is Barnstable County. So that phrase, area median income, or AMI, is going to be ever present as we do our work and as we talk about affordable housing in Harwich. That definition comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is the federal agency that regulates much of what we talk about affordable housing in the nation, and certainly affordable housing in the Commonwealth and here in Cape Cod. So it is a income level. Yes, sir.
Is it who lives in Barnstable County or works in Barnstable County?
Excellent question. I believe technically it's neither. So the area is defined as a census data population, or CDP. So Barnstable County, through the town of Barnstable, is what the federal government's using for the area median income standards, but it's applied essentially in this case to all of the towns of Cape Cod. Does that help?
Well, I just was thinking there are a lot of people that work remote. Their income taxes might say they make this much, but they don't actually work here in Barnstable
So
County.
generally speaking,
they just live here.
Yeah, when they talk about households, first they're using an average of a household, a family of 4. Generally speaking, we'll see that the different variations on size, but area is, for us, is Barnstable County as determined by HUD, and that's what we base it on. There are, I believe, at least seven or eight different areas in the Commonwealth, so those figures can shift. But this is the data that we rely upon because the federal government says that's what the standard is. So then for moderate income, again, it's defined in this case as a household earning more than 50% of the area median income, again for us in Barnstable County, up to 80% of the area median income. Now, a couple points to note. First of all, these slides will be posted later on the town's website and available if you are trying to take some notes. And the next slide is going to dive into the numbers. And the reason why we put the numbers up, and I think my colleagues would agree, is it really helps crystallize for us on the trust what we're talking about. Some of the numbers that I saw were thought, well, gee, I wouldn't necessarily consider that to be low income or moderate income. Well, first of all, it doesn't really matter what I think. It matters what the process says. But the numbers are significant, and these are the numbers that we have to work within to achieve the goal of providing affordable housing. So low income, up to 50% of the area median income. Moderate income, more than 50, up to 80%. Workforce housing. This definition, because I will tell you, as I was prepping for the slide deck over the last several weeks, thank you for catching the eye. So what I do is I go on mass.gov, I Google, I do what anyone else does and say, what are these definitions from official agencies? Now the first two definitions there, in the same footnote, those definitions come directly from Housing and Urban Development, the federal agency that really, sets the tone for everything to do with housing in a government sector. This definition comes from Mass Housing, which is a quasi-government and non-government organization that deals with the issue of housing in Massachusetts, and this is their definition. I put that out there because I searched far and wide on HUD, on the Commonwealth of Mass, on the Cape Cod Commission, and I couldn't find a consistent answer. So we're going to start the discussion, we in the trust, by understanding that this may be our definition of workforce housing. So it says, generally understood, that was my phrase because it's this one place that says it, but it's housing with rents affordable to individuals and families with incomes of generally between 60% area median income and all the way up to 120% of area median income. Now, one of the things I want to put out there that we did not put into this slide deck, we're talking about income because income helps us define what can be affordable. As we get into this process, there are rent levels that are also available. So tonight we're only concerning ourselves with the income level of a household, and more often than not, we're going to think of a household of 4. So these 3 definitions aren't all the definitions, but these are the definitions that we wanted to start with on our conversation. And all of these definitions are built on the area median income. This is the biggest I can make the slide, so I'll try to point out some key things. So what is the median, the area median income? Our area again is Barnstable County, town of Barnstable, through the census data center. And we can look at the middle of that chart because it's a household of 1 through 1 person up to 8 people. And again, generally speaking, in government, when you develop policy or you work on projects, you look at the standard family of 4. So when we talked about low income is defined as median income for a family of 4 in this case, where they are making $54,000 or less. When we talked about moderate, we said more than 50, so more than 54,350, up to 80%. So a family of 4 that is making $86,950 total median income for the family, household of 4, that's the standard. And then for workforce housing, which is one of the things, again, we talk about and is mentioned in one of the articles coming up, that standard goes from, generally from, can you look at my cheat sheet, what did we say?
80 to 120.
Thank you, 80. So 86,950, all the way up to a family of 4 with a median income of $130,440. Now I got to interject myself as a person right now very quickly. I would never have conceived of a family income of that level being tied to government housing programs, but when you talk about workforce housing, you're talking about usually a family of more than just 1, and it can be that high of an income. The question then really comes back to, is that income sufficient for the rents or the mortgages and for the values that people have to take on? So for me, and I think for my colleagues, this chart was eye-popping. Because first of all, it's the actual data that goes back to the definitions of low, moderate workforce income. This information is updated annually, typically in the spring, so this is the current information for 2022. And again, this is the data for Barnstable County. If you were going to look up the area median income for any other area, including in the Commonwealth, the numbers may differ. And for those of us that live on Cape Cod, we expect them to differ. You know, they may be lower elsewhere because we know the cost of living on Cape Cod is higher. So a couple points to take from that. This is data that's derived again through the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government. They update the data annually. They do it in the spring. So these numbers, if we were working on projects and wanted to tie them back to the rent numbers that correspond to this, those numbers would be good until next spring. So these are the data sets that we have in mind when we talk about those phrases that we had earlier up on the screen. Anything else for you folks? All right. Before we go on, any questions on this? Richard?
Yes, Joe, thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight. Your mission talks about affordable and moderate. do you consider workforce to be part of that definition of moderate?
First of all, did everyone hear the question? Because the question was excellent. And if I can answer on behalf of my colleagues, I think we would say, no, we haven't gone to that level of detail yet. And before we do, because that is the question, before we get into those substantive discussions, we wanted to reach out to the community. And that's why we're starting this event. We're having another one in November. We're going to have more. Because as we get into that discussion, we can certainly go that way. Because as you said, our definition simply says low and moderate. And that definition exists in the trust declaration, which was a document that was created by the town going back to 2018, I believe. If we want to talk about workforce housing, I think we have to talk about it in terms of that definition. But then it does, the question is excellent because it says, if you're doing that and it exceeds moderate, is it affordable? So I love the question because we haven't gotten into it yet, but that's exactly the kind of discussions that we need to have. And it's the kind of discussions that we want the community to help us have.
Just because you mentioned that workforce housing is between 60% and 120%, if I read that correctly.
That's right. Sorry, thank you. And if we use the definition offered by mass housing, because again, workforce housing as a concept does not tie back to standardized housing inventory. That's why our town council was able to say, you can pursue workforce housing, but if you don't define it, it's not going to move anything to do with subsidized housing inventory.
It doesn't help our 5.5%.
Thank you. Here and then here.
Yeah.
Okay, on workforce housing, are you defining the workforce as being those who are seasonal or not full-time, 12 months? Or how are you defining it?
So the question is, how are we defining it? The short answer right now for tonight is that definition that we're using was derived straight from mass housing. Mass housing defines it related to a family of 4, and it is meant to understand annual, year-round employment. The question of seasonal, however, does come into play, and there are other metrics that we may have to look at when we talk about seasonal. But for our purposes right now, it does not factor that in for the working definition that we have. Elaine?
Who do you think would fall into that workforce housing category? Would it be, I mean, I don't know salaries here in town, but would it be firemen, policemen, teachers, you know, who would fall into that category?
So if we're talking about the category of 60% to 120%, one of the things that stuck out to me is if you look at 50, 60, and 80, and by the way, I didn't skip numbers. These are the only percentages that are recognized for these purposes. But I would say that as far as our managers go, for example, so town hall managers, professional staff, usually carry degrees and all of that, they tend to average what would be in that 80% range, more or less. You know, family of 4, 86, and what have you. Police, fire, those positions, it's varied because, you know, you're seasoned, and I'll say it that way because I'm seasoned, your seasoned employees have established income over time. I think when we're talking about housing, we're trying to attract others, and so to that end, a new firefighter coming in, and I look to others to help me, I think we're talking in that 55 to 60 range. Now, in that case, that might be an individual, though. It may not be a family of 4. So it fits when you talk about workforce housing, but to me, the bigger question is, does it fit to what we were expecting when we talk about affordable housing? Because, again, for this purpose this evening, and we're going to talk in a moment about some of the parcels that the trust has, the Board of Trustees has fiduciary control over for the purposes of affordable housing, we need to figure out what's affordable. We need to figure out what you want us to build, what we want to build, and what we think is going to work to accomplish our mission. And so workforce housing is going to tie into that, but we're going to have to dive deeper into it. Before here, I think there may, over here, sir?
Just one. This would be gross family income of that family of 4.
So I played with that, so I need to be careful. The data that you see here is exactly as it says. So if you're a family of 1, and you're in those percentages, that's your salary, that's what you bring in. When they talk about the standard family of 4, it's meant to be a family of 4, but it's not necessarily 4 income providers
Or 2
according.
income providers.
It's the income that the household has.
Right,
So if you think of the tax returns and things like that.
but it would be the gross income.
I believe this is gross, correct? Yep. Yes, sir.
It seems like the missing data here must be somewhere is what is the expected expenditure of somebody making $130,000 a year on housing?
Correct. So that, and the comment was, we're missing some data. We absolutely are. What we're missing is the rent concept of this. So, and I didn't want to go too technical, and this might be the last of the real technical slides, because we want to talk about some of the assets that we have. But you're absolutely right. As we get into this discussion, and the other engagement that we have scheduled later this year, the consultant that we work with is going to tie into that work as well. So you're absolutely right. There's more data, and there's another side of the equation. If they're making this income, the rent has to be affordable, and there are similar charts. So the charts would be those percentages, the family household amount, and what the HUD considers to be appropriate rent. All of that assumes that the projects that we'd be doing with these rents need to conform with housing and urban development. In other words, if we're going to do affordable, are we going to do it in the manner and the rents and the standards set by housing and urban development? I want to tell you that the answer is yes, but it's a policy decision and it's a bigger conversation. But that is the additional data that we need to have.
And one thing that's a good determination is that if you're using federal dollars, those are the numbers you play with, period.
Right.
If you don't make those numbers, you don't use federal dollars. So it's their money, their game.
And then additionally, if we're doing these projects to also try and impact upon our subsidized housing inventory, we have to meet those standards to have it be qualified. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah, in the back, please.
Under what umbrella is the Oak Pines or the housing development that is by Cranberry Pine Golf Course?
So thank you. You're talking Pine Oaks?
Yes.
I'm going to have to rely upon others. I believe Pine Oaks is under the Housing Authority.
It's federal.
But
It's run by.
So different from housing, but still federal.
Run by a
It's
nonprofit.
called
Yeah.
202 housing.
It's run by a
Yeah.
nonprofit. The town has nothing to do with it.
Thank you.
It's church homes.
It's a
Understood to be affordable housing under definitions? Yeah. So
But
the
that's
answer
not
is,
under your umbrella.
say again?
Is that under your umbrella?
No, what I'm hearing, and I apologize, I'm still going to say that I'm new here. I'm newer, but no, that development is not a town project, and it is not something that ties to our housing efforts. All right.
Pine Oaks is affordable housing, it's senior housing, and it's on our subsidized inventory.
So this private entity that does
It
that
makes up-
still taps in. Yeah.
It makes up 50% of our 5.4%
Thank you very much for that, Art. Did everyone hear that?
in one project,
Yeah.
but it's all affordable.
Yeah.
It's not workforce, anything else, it's all affordable. And some of the rates there are down as low as 30% for
Yeah.
rent.
Sure, absolutely.
It's all rental,
Yep.
even though it's a private.
and it's nice.
Excellent, well, thank you for that, and thank you for the question. Anything else before we move on? Anybody here?
Just that generally, the standard for housing for a bank, let's say, and I think for the state too, they would want someone to spend no more than 25% of their income on housing. The trend in the last 15 to 20 years has been 30%, and it's gone much higher recently. So, yeah, people are giving up medication to pay for housing, you know, that's, we want to, I would love to see it so that it is a 25% cap, like, as one of the baselines that we work with going forward. Can I
So-
say stuff like that? Is that
You
okay?
can say whatever you like.
Can
You're
I
an
say
appointed-
opinions?
Absolutely, you're an appointed member of a trust. So as we have that background with those data sets, the definitions that we have, we, the Board of Trustees for the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust, have several assets under our care, custody, and control. And I say assets because there are funds that we've received very generously through Community Preservation Committee over the years, seed capital money that we've gotten. We have revenue that the Board of Selectmen derives from cell tower income. And then we have actual parcels, some that we've gone out and purchased and some that have been transferred. So what we have over here is, for anyone that's ever visited my office, you've seen it. It's right by my door. It's been in my office for about the last year and a half. This is a site map of properties off of Pleasant Lake Avenue that were purchased by the trust from the estate of Jim and Elizabeth Marceline, the Marceline family. And so it's March to date, our first and major purchase of assets under custody, parcels that we need to develop. We've been working on this concept for a year, and it's been the preliminary stuff behind the scenes. We're now venturing into a point where we're going to actively engage in the process of developing these parcels for the benefit of affordable housing. So the question to the trust has been, what are you going to build? And I think the question from the trust to the community is, what are we going to build? And so that's one of the reasons why we've started this engagement tonight. We're going to have more starting next month on, we have the means, we have the property, what do we want to create for the town of Harwich in this area of town that can impact upon affordable housing. Additionally, we have other various properties that have been transferred from the town through town meeting that I believe we still presently have 6 of them. And these were different parcels that the town had through the Board of Selectmen that the town had no use for, so it was considered surplus. So the Board of Selectmen, working with town meeting in 2019, transferred those parcels from the town through the Board of Selectmen, and they're now under the care, custody, and control of the trustees through the trust. And we'll talk about some of those in a moment. But as we talk about these parcels and some of the other parcels that we've analyzed, we also want to hear from the community going forward, what other places? So if you know Pleasant Lake Avenue, it is in the Pleasant Lake Village, see I remember them still, of the town, one of our 7 villages. And so it's, I forget the roadway now I've done it. 130 something.
124.
Exactly, like I said, 124, Route 124, or Pleasant Lake Avenue. And so it's right near the park and ride, it's right near the highway. It is a great location for someone to build something. And so that's our big project, and we're going to be able to do that in that village, in that area. Some of the other parcels that we have, I think as you'll hear later on in the conversation, we, the trust, may not be able to do something with them, but we may be able to dispose of them by sale and use the proceeds from the sale to fund future developments or projects. So one of the outstanding questions that we have as a community is, given the places that we're working and can work, what other places do we want to look at, and what other options do we want to pursue? So these are some of the assets that we have, but these are some of the outstanding questions. Before I move on from that slide, anything from my colleagues?
Go ahead.
Any questions from, yes?
The property, the Marceline property, that was basically the junkyard. Now, is that a brownfield, or it's not the brownfield?
So it's not the junkyard, and we're not dealing with brownfield, it's directly across.
So it's his mother's house?
Next to Wayne Elder.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, if you're at the park and ride, it's across.
It's across.
Yep.
Across.
Thank you.
Okay. So none of the property that you are in control of has any environmental issues with it that you have a lot
None to our knowledge, but of course, as we do projects, we have to do all the standards of care and due diligence, but no, we expect that to be very buildable property.
It's on the other side of the highway.
I understand.
So the last time my colleagues would have engaged in this community forum type of event, it was back in April of 2019, and it was right before the annual town meeting. And part of their discussion then was about Article 61 at the annual town meeting. So that town meeting did in fact, under Article 61, transfer from the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen to the care, custody, and control of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Fund through the trustees. And so all of them are zeros as far as street address, because these are old parcels, these are antique parcels, these are odd-shaped parcels that may not have had value over time. Now, of those 6, there were originally 8. So the 2 that did not go forward, one of them that did not go forward was the Albro House. So if you're familiar with that property next door to Town Hall, that was originally contemplated to be transferred, and I think wisely at the time everybody said, no, we're not going to do that one. Now, of these 6, the 2 that are highlighted are on this map over here, and these represent the 2 parcels at Oak Street. So we're getting now close to Cranberry Valley. If you're heading down towards the community center and the high school, and before Cranberry Valley, these parcels show up on your left-hand side. So they are 0 Oak Street, Assessor's Map 61, parcel B1A and B1B. So I bring these up because the trust has been, we went through our list and said, okay, let's pick some and let's start evaluating and analyzing them, and we've done that. And so what you see here is a topography and site survey that we had commissioned, and that's the most I'm going to say about it, and I'm going to make my colleague Brendan Lowney speak to what we came out of that.
So what this shows is existing conditions. As we get these properties, we have to get site plans going or find out what's really going on with them. We have a little bit of description. This is probably tough for everyone to see, but you look at 3 acres and you get excited about that. And you're like, all right, let's put something right in the middle and we can do it. But when you start taking a closer look, and we had Conservation Way on this, you have wetlands in the middle, and from all of your setbacks, you see these little pieces of blue, that's where you can build. So think of my thumb as a potential house right there. Then you have to accommodate septic, reserve, and all the setbacks. And it really turns into a piece of property that may not be suitable to do anything with. So this might be a property that we sell and see if someone has a plan of attack for this. But unfortunately, as we go through these properties, we were really excited about this one, but unfortunately, it's probably not something we can build on. So as we go through each property, we'll have to do these steps. Now, there is a cost associated with this. We have to weigh those options as well. We don't want to just start spending money. So we wanted to use this as the first because we really thought there was some promise here, and unfortunately there wasn't. So that's Oak Street, but there's some promise to sell some of this property and use that money elsewhere.
Thank you, Brendan. Any questions for Brendan on those 2 properties? Art?
Why don't we sell it right now?
So,
I don't need it, I got a piece of property, thank you.
Joe, can you explain what we could do with as far as selling it with with credits?
Sure. One of the things, so if you are so inclined to watch our meetings, or even better yet, come to them, the last few meetings that we had in the summer is when we really dove into these properties, and beyond the engineering work that was done, we relied upon town staff. So we heard from our conservation administrator, Amy Usowski, and so while there's no value, presumably, for the trust to build housing there, there may be value, so we can certainly try to sell it on the open market for someone, they are split already, that sell each parcel individually and distinctly, see what the market gets for them, or Amy has indicated that we may be able to sell portions of the parcels for credits related to nitrogen abatement and all the work that we're doing on wastewater treatment and all of that. There may be, and I'm not going to do it completely right because I'm neither Amy nor Dan, but generally speaking, that's generally near an area of critical concern and a water recharge district. So there may be property owners nearby that can meet the standards. We could sell easements to them on those properties, get a value from them, and they get the value of meeting the nitrogen recharge and all of that. I think that's what we're talking about. Having said that, we're still exploring it because it doesn't look like we're going to be able to commingle these parcels together. We're not going to be able to subdivide, and we're not going to be able to build anything of substance on it. So we're still evaluating what other value can we derive from those parcels. and then we'll go through the other 4 that are on the list and do the same exercise.
And then real quickly, this property still would have to go, so anyone, let's say if someone wanted to build something here, maybe a little tiny 1-bedroom house, is that possible? It would still have to go in front of conservation health, so there's some more due diligence to be done. But as far as we're concerned, I think we've gone as far as we can with this property, without spending more dollars.
Yes, please.
Could it be a solar farm?
Excellent question. The question is, could be a solar farm? We haven't explored that yet. But those are the kind of things we look at. Meaning, the trust has a fiduciary, the trustees have a fiduciary responsibility to say, what can we get from this asset that we can then use the proceeds for the betterment of affordable housing? So if it's those easements and credits, that's one value. Solar farm may have it. We're still exploring. It doesn't sound like for that property, though, I think the process we're going to finalize is on those easement credits. That may be the best use there. Or we may just end up having to sell it. Again, we're going to apply the same standard of care and evaluation to all those parcels.
I don't think you can sell an easement for the seller. You would have to actually sell a portion of the lot to deed over to another landowner so they can get that credit. So the easement wouldn't work. You need to sell a portion of the land.
Thank you. Exactly what I said is what Richard said. No, thank you, Richard. I appreciate the clarification. Jeff?
Thank you, Jim. Do we know, what did it cost the town of Harwich to acquire those 2 parcels? And maybe I missed that, but
Well, so it's an excellent question.
how did we
However,
get the parcels?
for any of those parcels and these parcels, these could be ancient parcels that were abandoned. These could have been tax title forfeiture, any number of ways. Whatever the cost was, it was years ago. So for me, when I look at that as the town administrator, I say the cost of acquiring them, if any, was amortized over decades.
Understood.
So there really is more of an upside of value to get
Which was
something
my
out.
point.
It's a great question though, because as we do those takings now, it's a much more relevant conversation on how much did we pay to get it, how much can we get in return. Yep.
Does the act of putting sewage in to this town change the dynamics of the buildable spots?
In this particular instance, no, because that's the only question I could come up with, because I don't know much about construction and all of that. But I asked the question, if we had wastewater coming down on Oak Street and we tied into that, does it change it much? And the answer is no.
I mean, for Oak Street, it's very unique because you have conservation issues and you have vernal pools, and there's other setbacks and rules that apply. So your 50-foot rule goes to 60 feet, and it gets smaller and smaller, so you can never trump conservation. You'll have to abide by all of that. So to do like solar farm, you probably couldn't just knock down trees and do that.
Well, that would be
Yeah,
my
I mean,
second.
that's just,
That would
just
be my
thinking out
second
loud.
question.
If you could envision a castle that you build on a very small parcel of land that you came to by helicopter, that would be a perfect explanation.
But there's nothing to stop us from doing an RFP and having a developer look at that, and maybe he wants to build a little 1-bedroom affordable housing unit. That's a possibility. It is 3 acres,
It's next to the golf course.
there's a possibility, right?
Would the
But as
town
far as we're
privately
concerned,
partner?
it's not enough for us to do something.
Would the town partner privately with somebody to do that?
Absolutely.
In terms of solar though, I don't think you could have any kind of, that's not zoned
It's a structure.
properly.
It's also a structure you can't put on.
You can't have any new,
No.
there's, like I said, there's certain rules that, if you look real close, you'll see my pencil marks. My thumbprint
Yeah.
is the space. And you could put something there, but there's gonna be a challenge. You still have to get through health, and we didn't even get that far. So this is a property that will lead to a developer, or we'll do something else with the property.
But the discussion and the comments you just brought up are what we do, so hearing you folks go through that exercise is helpful. What we'd want you to take from this slide is whatever assets we have outside of, cash derived from CPC and cell tower, we have these other properties and more that we may be getting, and what we're trying to do is say, okay, what's the value? First of all, can we build something? If we can't build something, what's the value? If there isn't value, how do we want to dispose of it? Move on. Richard?
A lot of these are marginal, as Brian says.
Yep.
You've got a premier, pristine parcel on Pleasant Lake Avenue. That is where the most potential is to actually accomplish something.
Right.
You guys are working diligently in the background, and no one sees the work you do.
Having said that,
That is.
Richard is talking now about.
We did not rehearse this segue, but here
That
we go.
project. And, a year ago in December and January, the trust got into discussions with the owners of the Marceline property, the executors and the attorneys. And it took 3 or 4 months, I think, before we went through the process of looking at all the land, checking the titles. That was a thrill. After all, it is Cape Cod. And getting it appraised, and then, the fun part of finding a surveyor, that was always rather unique nowadays. At any rate, all those steps were done, and we really have to thank the Marceline Trust, the family trust, for giving us the opportunity to purchase that. Right now, what you see is all of the problems that we talked about before virtually do not apply to this parcel. This is a blank palette that you get to look at. There's a roadway, a legal roadway that goes through there that was mercifully laid down by the county in 1856, and it still belongs to the town of Harwich. Thank you. And all those little parcels here intersected with owners unknown. Maybe not so much unknown anymore. Now they're beginning to remember they're known. So, as a matter of interest, we're looking to pick up some of these parcels, probably for some of the back taxes that people are more than willing to pay now. However, the difficulties that we laid out here, there's 13.34 acres cross-hatched out. The current zoning out here is, you can see these lines coming back off Oak Street. They're 250,000 square feet apiece. That's 2.5 acres. About 100, 2.5 acres. Yeah, 100. About 100,000 square feet. So if we were to divide the parcel up into the amount of square feet, just by that, we'd be able to get 4 or maybe 5 lots if we're really lucky. However, you can come up and look. And so the way it sits now, it has big zoning on it. Some of it is zoned at 100,000 square feet. In all probability, we will look at, that's Queen Anne Road.
I'm very aware, and now where were these, if you said these were very obvious to the public, I was in planning and your office asking about this meeting. Nobody told me about these big pictures. The lady nice enough in planning went right to the books and showed me which parcels.
Well, these are the parcels. They're just in bigger. They're bigger.
I'm only saying, when I went, she told me the parcels. Look, I would have been happy to look at these big pictures, but you're saying they were, where were they? Where are they in your office?
So these big pictures are in my office on that board.
I'm sorry, where, in, who, I'm sorry, you are the
I am Joe, the town administrator, and you're the
so,
administrator.
so you are in the office upstairs? You're in the office?
I'm on the
Downstairs.
intermediary level, is that what we call that?
Okay, I don't mean to anything.
No. But if I could, it's an excellent question, and for further research on this, after the trust acquired the property, and you can see the seal here, the trust, through the former chair and member Don Howell, filed an approval not required, or A&R plan. So the A&R plan is on file with our planning department. That's on me to make sure they know that they have it. And so there's more information on that as far as the A&R plan goes. So I have this in my office, but we do have documents on file with the planning department because of the approval not required.
Is it possible for an individual to go into your office and get a printed copy of it and take home?
A printed copy of that, these are this big.
I'm just asking because I happen to be very involved in this.
Sure, so Theo, you can get a copy of it, yes. You can get it at that scale, or you can get it at this scale.
Do you want me to take that home?
No. I don't have one to give you. If you give me your name, I can get you one. That's all that it shows. Yep.
Okay, all right.
You write your name down on a piece of paper
All
and
right,
give it to me.
that's fine, but I am very involved in this location. And so, I have been watching these roads. Where does this road go? Where is this road go to an abandoned house, dilapidated house?
That's not a road.
Where,
It's a driveway.
it's a driveway, okay.
So we're gonna have an
I'm sorry.
opportunity, that's all right, no. We're gonna have an opportunity to have more in-depth conversations tonight with these drawings and others with all of us, but we're gonna get through a couple more slides before we can get to that.
And
But for the record, if I may, the answer is yes. If citizens are looking for information, correct, Selectman Kavanaugh? We will provide it, absolutely. So, and for you, I can tell you that we have the printer now working that does 24 by 36 inch, so we will get that for you, absolutely.
Thank you.
Larry, anything else on Marceline?
I'll just fill it out real quick, but, you know, the number of things that I'd like you to think about. Number one is, do we want to do single-family housing? Do we do multiple family housing? Do we want to own it? Do we want to sell it? Do we want to develop it ourselves? Nice, easy questions. No easy answers. So that's why we're having a lot of meetings. How much do we want to have? Do we want Chloe's Path, or do we want 250,000 square foot ranches? So we have a fair bit of work to do, and that's exactly why everybody is sitting here. We'd be more than delighted to give you
We already made the effort, we're gonna get that squared away.
We'll get
She's all
that,
set.
we'll get a copy for her,
Absolutely.
and I'll give her a pencil, she can fill in the blanks too, okay? At any rate, if you have any questions for me, I'll be delighted to answer them afterwards.
And we have 2 more slides to get through. They're not as in-depth as these, but we will get back to that. And what Larry was just saying is how we're gonna end our slide and start, hopefully beginning tonight, the dialogue and discussion. So, for our next slide, you folks have to sit through a sales pitch. It's not a timeshare, but we are hiring. So we are the town of Harwich. And if you or somebody you know is interested in advocating for affordable housing in Harwich, we are hiring a housing advocate. So 3 years ago, when the Affordable Housing Trust did a community engagement such as this, one of the individuals that was present was a person known as a housing coordinator. And the town received that service through a vendor. Well, as the town has been discussing its commitment to affordable housing, and many of you have been part of that discussion and part of that solution, town meeting this past May approved the creation of a full-time benefited position known as a housing advocate. That person would be doing a lot of what I'm doing tonight. So if you want to help me save my voice, if you want to help us move forward, we are seeking a housing advocate for the town of Harwich. So if you know anyone that's interested, I know I didn't know it did the flashing, it'll stop in a minute, but please see the link. The job is still posted on the town's website under work opportunities. And folks, that's a critical piece that we're missing that we need to fill. And I really believe that when we fill that position, it's going to help all of us move the needle and the discussion on affordable housing.
And Joe, that's the person that's going to be working with us, with the housing committee, housing authority.
Correct. So the comment was, this person is going to be working with the trustees, with the housing authority, with the housing committee, real estate and open space. You know, they're going to be the point person on all things to do with affordable housing. And they're going to work for me, and I'm going to be the point person on all things affordable housing. And I work for the Board of Selectmen, and they're the point. See what we're doing there? So we need a dedicated person, another resource, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to help with these discussions, and they're going to help coordinate through all the groups. Speaking of housing authority, Elizabeth?
Thank you. Why are you calling it housing advocate? That seems to me like isn't it supposed to be a coordinator?
So the concept that we went through both at the trust level, the board level, and finance committee level is what we're trying to indicate is we're not looking for someone to merely coordinate. The advocate, and according to the job description that we have that's out there, is meant to be the primary point of advocacy. This is the person whose job responsibility is to look for opportunities to move the discussion on affordable housing. to look for grant opportunities that the trust or the Board of Selectmen or any of the other groups dedicated to housing may rely upon. So we're not looking for them to simply coordinate. We're looking for them to be an advocate. And that was the purpose of that title and that discussion.
So they're supporting, all the groups we just mentioned.
Yep. Peter?
So can you say what have been the issues with finding a candidate? Because it's been posted for some time, right? Is it lack of housing, ironically?
Mercifully, in that instance, no. But I think to Elizabeth's question, we're trying to envision a new role that didn't exist here. All of the other towns, as great as I thought I was in trying to work on this, everyone's working on it. Other folks have done it. But I will also tell you that we've heard from housing advocacy groups that have said that the town of Harwich's commitment to the role is stronger than any other.
Great.
And so that's why I wanted to take this commercial break to make that pitch, because it's a critical role where we have the commitment and the money from the town to do it. We need to fill that role.
And it's a busy role, so I had a chance to sit down with the person who runs, who's the coordinator or advocate for Brewster. And she'll field about 40 to 50 phone calls a week. That's how busy she is. So there's a lot to be done, and to have that person that someone from the community can call and reach out to, and then get information from all of these boards. There's a lot of meetings to watch, from open space to us to the housing, to get it all together. That person will be very important for that task.
Any questions on last one before we get to our last slide of data? And that one simply is to say, as promised, so that additional community forum engagement on affordable housing is going to be right here. We believe, if it changes, we'll let you know, but right here on Tuesday, November 1st at 7 p.m. And we're going to be joined by Jen Goldson from J.M. Goldson, and that's the Trust's consultant on developing an action plan. And so Jen's going to come out and reach out to the community and ask for input and give insight. And then she's going to help the Trust develop an action plan with deliverables and vision and mission to help us, as we work with you, to create affordable housing. So please be aware of that. And additionally, and I know we've got some members this evening who were able to join us from the local planning committee. Thank you, folks, because the local planning committee has just been established to help the town create our decennial effort on our local comprehensive plan. Affordable Housing Trust members need help with the community engagement. The local planning committee is going to need help with community engagement. So I am working on establishing a platform through a vendor relationship where the town's going to be able to augment our website and engage electronically, digitally, and the way that the folks that use phones do more often. So we're not only going to do events like this, we're going to augment it and enhance it by also investing in a community engagement platform. So I'm excited about that, but I'll stop talking about it until the proof's in the pudding. So those are the two other things we wanted to let you know, because now, as I promised you at the beginning, and I've talked so long you may have forgotten, the Trust has one simple question for you, the community. What do you think? What do you think about the topics that we've talked about? What do you think about the properties that we have? And what do you think, as Larry said earlier, what do you think we should do with that beautiful parcel on Pleasant Lake Avenue for the benefit of our town? Purposefully, a very open-ended question, something that we're not going to complete tonight. But if there's any thoughts or any questions on anything we talked about, we still have my favorite sticky notepad easel over there. We can document anything you want to talk about. And again, we will bring it back on November 1st. So open it back up to you folks for comments, questions, or concerns. Jeff?
I'll start. Thank you. This was fantastic, Joe, and to the group up there. Thank you. And Larry, I think you're aces. We've had some conversation. I think you're fantastic, as well as the rest of you. I go back to money. Who's gonna pay for this? How long will this take? Does the town want? I know it's a lot of questions being thrown out there. Does the town, as Larry brought up, do we want to own the property indefinitely? That way we can control upkeep and certain other things that come with more dense housing? Or do we want to sell it, which we would lose some control and the ability to maintain it and so forth and so on? And then I guess my last question out of the four here is there a working model in place right now where other towns have done it? Do they keep the housing project or do they sell it? Have we looked at those options?
So real quickly,
Sure.
the town of Yarmouth, we did a walkthrough on a property, this is before COVID, and it's on 28, and it's 3 buildings.
Mhm.
And it was a dilapidated motel that the town, I think they either sold it or they gave it for a 99-year lease or sold it for $1, what have you. But either way, they built 69 affordable units there. And the town said, if you build 69, we'll give you $30,000 for each unit. So for $2.1 million, the town got 69 units. Now, can we build a unit for $30,000?
No.
Absolutely not. And then it weighs, so a piece of land like Oak Street, do we want to build a little 1-bedroom house and spend $450,000? Probably not a good use of the money, but we're looking to connect with just one option, a developer that wants to come in and maybe provide something. Now, I'm not saying 69 is the number for us, or a 3-story building that's, 80 feet long. That's probably not maybe what we want for Harwich, or maybe it is. But that's what we need to talk about.
Now, and another option that, to build on what Brendan has to say is that along with what Joe mentioned, there's other parcels, there's a lot of other parcels of land in town. And the option that the trust does have is that we can not only buy, but we can sell, lease, and rent. So with money that we acquire from the sale of property that we have, and we're allowed to sell some of that property, make no mistake about it, some is restricted, we can't sell it. But it looks to me like the potential is there to self-fund it. We could get some money from the town, which would likely be paid back, but it's going to be paid back, especially in the number of units that we get and the lack of long-term funding for it. We will not have to pay for it. It can pay for itself.
I just wanted to point out first, I think nothing can happen, and correct me if I'm wrong, nothing can happen there until the owners unknown pieces of land are, until that's figured out, like finalized. So nothing can happen in the next few months. We'll just say that for anybody that's eager to get out there with a hammer and nail, it just can't happen. There's lots of different models out there. Harwich is in a good position, I think, to make different choices. We don't have our backs against the wall. We have the opportunity to, own it long term. There's all we could do. Really,
It's a clear palette.
it's an absolutely clear palette, and I don't know how those decisions are finalized. I don't think there's a process.
With a process.
Or with a process.
Sure, so
But,
what is the process? What are we
It's not-
gonna
I
do?
don't-
What do we want?
right.
These are the questions that we're talking about tonight and going forward on. Specifically with Marceline, we are working on the owners unknown, but we can still progress on that. What I would say though is, and I'll defer to Brendan, Larry, and Judith, is whatever it is, whatever we decide, and we isn't we is we, is it's going to take years, it's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take time, whatever it may be. So there are a lot of great questions out there. I'm going to add, I think, the one skill that I may bring, and that is the chief bureaucratic officer for the town of Harwich. We, to your great question, Jeff, the question comes back is, do we want to move the needle on that subsidized housing inventory for the specific purpose of getting closer to that magic number? Do we want to do workforce housing, whether it meets the definition of affordable, legally based on HUD? These are the questions that we ask, and these are the questions that we have to answer. So we're going to, again, do our production plan discussion starting in November, but the board meets, the trust here meets twice a month, and at our next meeting, we're going to have an update on the owners unknown, and we're going to take the next steps on what can be done to that property to start clearing land and developing land. Richard.
Okay, sorry, I just want to say one other thing. we don't have to decide to do the same thing on all of the land. I mean, there's an opportunity to create a number of villages in this large acreage with different types of housing to meet different types of needs.
I think one thing that Joe spoke about and didn't go into in great detail, when we say that we get to the subsidized housing, the target for Harwich would be 10% of its total housing to be subsidized housing. If that occurs, that triggers a number of things that are advantageous to the town. The largest one is that Chapter 40B, and I won't go into a great explanation of that, that is the determination of the percentage of affordable housing for each city and town on the Commonwealth. And when you reach 10%, there's only, to the best of my knowledge, two or three places in the Commonwealth that have it: Boston, Worcester, and I believe Lawrence, but I'm not 100% sure. Everybody else does not have 10%, and as a result, 40B kicks in, and a developer can come in and work on the zoning to their advantage, whereas the reverse is true when we reach 10%. And this project has the potential of reaching 10% of affordable housing.
You have the term, friendly 40B and hostile 40B. So the hostile could be like when you're driving in your town, you see, oh, what's that huge building doing there? It could be that.
That's what you're getting across the
It's
street.
all about working with the developer, friendly 40B. If you get there, you get to your 10%, that's the goal. And that's our goal. Our goal is to be able to.
I know we've hit a good topic, and we're going to want to get to everybody. Richard, you had your hand up.
Couple of things. The true number of the 10%, we're at 5.4.
Something, yeah.
So we need 500 or so more units to get to that 10%. 500.
We probably won't get it on this property.
So. That's a lot of numbers. So, but the other thing is in a place like that, I think you can do multiple neighborhoods. I think there's something else that you haven't even talked about, which is subsidized with veterans housing. That could work in well. I think neighborhoods are important. I think having diversity rather than just having all affordable either rentals or homes. I think there are opportunities to bring some diversity to a property like that. Number one. Number two, I don't think the town should be in the building business. I think there are experts out there, there are developers. I think the gentleman, I apologize, I don't know your name, talked about private-public partnerships, that you bring in the groups and the organizations that have excellent experience in getting federal tax credits, because that's what a lot of these subsidized developments are done, with federal tax credits and make it affordable. I think that we should be looking at partnering with someone else to do it. We should not be in the building business ourselves. The chief bureaucratic officer understands the bureaucracy is dealing with something like that, and government can get in the way. And I just think that's a great opportunity. The other parcels that you have in town could fund some of these things, but I think you've got an opportunity to get to that next 500 units of affordable. It's going to be a long time before we get to 10%. We do have an emergency in housing. Because right now, people cannot hire, town cannot hire. There's a housing crisis in this country. There's a housing crisis on Cape Cod. There's a housing crisis in Harwich. We have to start creating it. We've got to be creative in how we talk about it. These are things that the businesses, the town itself saying, I want to hire someone at a salary of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, which is great. For the average person to buy a house, they need to have $180,000 to $190,000 in income to qualify for mortgage to buy that house. So I think we do, yes, it's going to take years. We don't have a whole lot of that. We need to get more.
Yeah, and we lack rentals and condos. So across the country, just to give you some numbers, 63% across the U.S., 63 is single family. Then you get to Mass, it's 52%. And then when you get to Cape Cod, it's 80%. And Harwich is very unique because we have 88% of our homes as single family. And then 42% of them are, probably know this number better than I, are second homes. So you put it in all perspective, there's a lot of single family. Like how do we get to that number if we're not doing, some creative building?
Quick point on subsidized housing. It is a dynamic number. You don't want to go for 10, you want to go for 12 or 13, and it gets updated. So a community can reach the number your population demographics and the base number changes and you'd have to do it again. So, you know, it's not one and done. Julie, did you want to offer something?
So the other thing that kind of plays into this whole conversation too is that, you know, apart from this parcel, which is a unique parcel that has a lot of different opportunities, we're also at a critical point where we have a local planning committee now. We also are talking with our trust and trying to get the community engaged. We also have an ADU bylaw, but truthfully, and I just ran into this with a resident asking me questions, you know, what's happening is we did this to create housing. We went for this bylaw, which was supposed to be by right, so that you could build either, you know, rent your home and build an accessory dwelling unit, can't exceed 900 square feet, there are certain stipulations, to create more housing. However, what's happening is, and so we're gonna have to talk about this, we've got a lot of different things at play here. We have bylaw, charter review, we're gonna be looking at zoning. We've got a local planning committee now, we've got the trust up and running and doing lots of great work. But we also have these barriers that are self-imposed. So we really need to look hard at zoning. And we need to look hard at zoning as it interacts with health. Some of these zoning regulations were put in place a while ago because of health things, right? Requirements, etc. We have some areas of town that will be sewered. We have some areas of town that are sewered. That doesn't mean you can add bedrooms. It doesn't mean, you know, you can increase the size. But there are ways to work to create housing. And the ADU is important because you can keep elderly people in their homes while creating year-round housing for renting the house that can house a larger family. That's what's lacking in our rentals. I rented units for, you know, 9 years, and really the bulk of those units were 1- and 2-bedroom units. That doesn't help families.
And I just want to say that ADU is great, except that it's expensive. I've looked into doing it on and I don't think I can afford to do it.
It's another, right? And how do you maybe look to create some sort of financial assistance? You know, there's so many different layers of things that we've tried to do positively, but we need to really look hard at them and scale them back where we can, and actually induce them into something more if we have the ability. Of course, we're always talking money. Nobody wants to talk about the budget when we get around to having to deal with it. We're starting now, but it is the fall, and it's important to start thinking about changes to these bylaws that would be helpful in creating more opportunities for housing. And now's the time to be doing that because we have to get them refined prior to the warrant.
In the back, there was a hand up.
I think Richard's question got to mine, but it was the order of magnitude. I think there was a comment up front that you said that this parcel would address the other half of the 10% gap. So I was trying to understand the order of magnitude of units that we need to have in Harwich in order to have that 10%. So how many parcels, now that I'm on this stage here,
Say that last part again.
how many units are we actually talking about for these parcels?
Depends on your subdivision pencil.
Okay, so what if it's single family versus multi?
There's no answer.
There's no easy answer.
Well,
That's what they're working on.
What's the pencil sketch?
Well, blending, so I always go back to that Yarmouth model. So when they did their affordable housing there, they did 30, 60, 80% median income. So you try to build this community. So maybe it is 5 houses and a couple of townhouses, and what Davenport did on the way to the dump, those homes. Think of that. It could be all of that. It could be a community that you're building within that.
Duplex.
I mean, there's 13 acres or so there's a
Over
lot
here?
that could be
Yep.
done.
Yeah, I actually think the question about how many houses, you really have to get to that, because in some ways, you guys have a limited capacity to take on projects. And I would advise, like selling it to someone who's going to develop it and save your energy to a property where you could build 200 or 300 units somehow or other. So
we want to hit the inventory. We want that number to go up.
Right.
So everything we're doing is to manage that number goes up.
And I think that if you did have an ambitious project that had a lot of that, there is advantages, I think, to hold on to it and do it. And, a whole other investing type of entity occurring, this impact investing world of people who are sometimes firms who want to do something charitable, but they want to get a return. And those type of folks would fund this, and then the payback would be in 20 years they would own it, or 30 years they would own it, and they would hope that they would make a profit over the long run. So I think there are lots to do, but it's not worth doing except unless you're on a bigger scale, which probably means sewers, and all that. This is great work you're doing.
I got a couple of questions here, a couple of comments. I hate to be the devil's advocate sitting in the room. But back to the Marsland property, now you brought up a couple of things. So that's not free and clear. We're talking about owners unknown?
In the middle.
Peppers? Oh, in the middle, that middle section?
That middle parcel where.
Okay, so if I was a developer today, could I come in and say, okay, I'm gonna build X number of units for X number of dollars and I need something from you? So would that?
So as we sort the proproperties,
Would
we do our.
No, I haven't toured it, but I understand there's a part in the middle that's not clear.
One here,
Free and clear.
one here, another one here, and a couple of shaky ones.
So, well.
There's a couple of triangles hither and yon that happened during the Route 6 building.
Yeah, but that's like the fly in the ointment right now, right?
Pardon me?
Is that like the fly in the ointment, or could you actually start
No,
developing?
it's not a fly in the ointment.
There's no fly in the ointment?
No, and anybody that doesn't know they own it,
Okay, so
will soon be surprised.
Getting close.
you want to go ahead. I just want to push this conversation from Marsland property. You want to go ahead with this, right?
We can go ahead with that without them. That doesn't mean, they don't make a bit of difference to us.
Here's a simple idea, just a simple thing. Put a sign out there. Future home of Harwich's affordable housing.
You think they come and see us then?
Put your telephone number down and your address, they'll be at your doorstep. No, put your telephone number or email address, or you know, the web, whatever way you want to communicate. Let the town people know where the Marsland property is with a sign there. I mean, and you know, we can get the town to build a sign. It's not a big expenditure. Someone install it, and it generates some interest that this is the future home of what we're looking at. That's all. That's my first question. The second question is, I haven't heard anything about it tonight. What happened to the project on Sisson Road? That was going to be our shining star. That was going to be our, not we. I was cut out of the circle. Forget about me. I took an early retirement. But the trust, that was going to be their shining star. The project on Sisson Road. There's going to be 4, 6, or 8 units rental, and it was going to pull out all the stops. It was going to be a show place. I even secured a letter from one of the abutters saying it's a great idea. What happened?
So what happened is COVID, soil tests that were before COVID, but the trust hasn't forgotten about it. That's one of the properties that was transferred officially. So the work that we had begun was before the deeds were actually transferred. It is still part of our inventory, and it is still part of the projects we're working on. Again, we spent, where's the other one? We spent the summer evaluating these 2 parcels. We can spend more time reviving, and I believe it's 263 Sisson Road project. Right. So we haven't forgotten about it,
okay, good.
But there were some administrative oversights that we had to stop until the land was legally transferred and under the care, custody, and control of the trust.
Okay.
So still there, and I haven't forgotten about it.
Fair enough.
Sir, right here.
Yeah, if you had established a goal range of how many units of housing you want to put on that property, did you discuss that? When you put in 50, 250, is there a particular range that you folks are looking to accomplish?
We could answer that. And I'm sure Mr. Galvin would love to put it in the paper, but there is no right answer to it. This is what we're waiting to hear. I could say it'd be all, if we put all single families in and did them, you can divide it up by the amount of square feet. There's 581,000 square feet there. Put a divisor on it, you can just figure out what it is.
In order to expand or accomplish one of your goals, have you considered making it a special, zoning district in town and adjusting the regulations to accomplish, be able to get lot sizes that help to maintain or realize an affordable housing situation. Because at the current 40,000 square feet, it's hard to get affordable housing.
I suspect the best way to answer that would be that Richard had brought it up that there'd be an area of several neighborhoods, and they could be, because there's very distinct pieces there, and there's a lot of land that's already developed.
Well, I understand.
But nevertheless, there's the potential for a goodly number of lots there. Sewering will come too.
We have this jewel to then apply our current zoning regulations on it, which are, 40,000 square feet typically, or to adjust the zoning in that special district so you can increase the amount of multifamily housing or apartment sizes, whatever, as well as single-family units. Make it a special zoning district, but don't do that until you come up with a goal that you're trying to accomplish in that site for a number of units. Whether it be 100, 150, establish that goal and then look at what you need to do for zoning for a special district to accomplish that.
There's been a couple of developments that have been proposed in town that are relatively high to my way of thinking, to other people might think differently. But I think if you're looking for neighborhoods that have a neighborhood feel, it might be some combination between what Davenport Commons did, and we're speaking to them. We've been in contact with the developers down in Yarmouth and seen them, and we'll go and talk to them again, along with single-family developers. So anything in between, and to make them distinct neighborhoods that would fit the town of Harwich. We don't want this Route 9 in Framingham.
Yeah, as we vet each property, we're going to be sending out RFPs to developers to come to the table.
I know, but if you establish a special zoning district, it's going to be more valuable to developers
That's
to look at.
interesting.
That's all I'm trying to express.
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth?
Well, this is fabulous, and it's going to be really fun to play with ideas and everything. We need housing now. Now. Not tomorrow, not in 5 years, now. Now, you've got these properties. If you're not going to build on them now, sell them, buy houses that exist, renovate them, and turn them into apartments. Because we need housing now. There are people who don't think apartments are good, but having lived in New York City, my favorite apartment actually was in an old house in Saratoga Springs. All the students in Saratoga Springs live in these old, gorgeous mansions and smaller houses where, regular people used to live, and they turned them into apartments, and they're fabulous. But we need to do that now, because otherwise, in 5 years, it's not going to matter, because we're not going to have any firemen, we're not going to have any police officers, we're not going to have any teachers.
Yep.
Who owns the land when you get off 6, right in front of you on 224, with all the signs, the Lion Club and all those, that piece of land, right in front of you when you get off?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
When you get off 6, onto 124.
Yeah, we're going to call it exit 10 because we know it to be that number.
I'm sorry, okay.
It's not, but.
Who owns the land under where all those signs are, like the Lions Club?
Correct. Behind that is the bulk of the area we're talking about.
Oh, behind that is the land we're talking about?
Correct. Yep.
Right. Okay.
If you took that exit and you took a left heading towards Brewster, you'll notice yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know the color. There's a yellow gate there. That's understood to be
Right here.
right here.
Right over the overpass.
So it's behind those signs, but if you see the gate, that's the entryway.
It's right across from the bus stop.
The entryway across from the parking lot.
The gate that goes across, the old gate.
Well, there's a new gate now.
There is a new gate now.
Yep.
Now, it is the house, and then it's the old gate.
Correct.
And then it's the signs. And then when is, the new gate is after that?
streets where you don't get much.
I'm sorry, I'm just asking.
Drive north,
While the chair of the Board of
127.
Assessors is helping with that,
It's all right,
comment or
I'm not
question
sure
right
if the
here?
sign would say,
No, that's fine.
no, that's fine.
I have 3 questions. So, our town voted for ADUs. How many ADU permits have been issued in our town since
Let's start again.
it's been legalized?
No, I understand that.
I don't off the top of my head, but we're gonna mark that and I'll get the
Over
answer.
there.
And what we'll do is we'll have
And
that announced at our next
Anything
meeting.
that happens here,
And then is there
anything here,
Ma'am, please.
no, I am not opposing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, is there any option to analyze the existing situation of bootleg apartments? I know the town of Barnstable went through that process several years ago where they were able to bring the bootleg apartments and make them, create them legally and put affordable housing covenants on them. And in order to come up, to begin to try and approach the 10% standard that the state has set for us.
So my first reaction with that to be when we talk about Barnstable, because the board's heard me talk many times that as we contemplate what other municipalities have done on things like that, the first thing we know is town of Barnstable goes through the ordinance process. And why that matters is they don't have to go to the same level of scrutiny on their zoning ordinances that we have to go through in the zoning bylaws. So when these issues come up, we do try to analyze them. But if we're the first to do it, we're trying to find someone else that has taken that effort, because it's unique, and we want to see is it going to pass muster. So we have some of those that we're evaluating, but I also want to tell you that we have our new building commissioner, who is new to Harwich but not new to building commission. Jack Mee's been on the job for over 20 years. That's the kind of thing that we're going to work with Jack on to see. What they did in Barnstable, even though it's an ordinance, is that something we can do, and how do we do it?
And then the third thing is an earlier discussion about the zoning. There is that issue of spot zoning, and so that idea of, you know, just taking a parcel and changing the zoning on it, isn't that contrary to the prohibition against spot zoning?
So generally, it could be considered that way. That's one of the reviews that the Attorney General does on town zoning bylaws, that they wouldn't necessarily do with ordinances, because they don't. However, there are instances where special districts can be created. So to avoid that, we'd have to be mindful of it, but it's not an automatic prohibition on that concept.
So the other thing is, I support Richard Waystack's opinion about selling or having people who are in the profession of developing this kind of housing. That's the route I would go. Hire an expert and put them in charge of it. But the thing is that could you still retain? I follow the Twin Brooks process in Hyannis, and one of the things that's impressed me is the lack of design control that the town has over what the developer is proposing. The developer is proposing, you know, basically concrete bunkers.
Right.
You know, nothing in the vernacular of the architecture that we all know and love. So I was wondering if, since you're making a wish list over there, I was just wondering if that idea of reserving design review could be something that is part of any kind of negotiation of
So we'll certainly add it, and it's certainly that concept. That's one of those sort of, not philosophical, but policy and community of, do we want to retain control over design? And if so, what's the compromise going to be, or what's the process going to be? But that's exactly the kind of thing we need to be aware of if we want to talk about a development that matches what the town sees for Cape Cod.
I do note that in the Town Brooks discussions, the biggest stumbling block they have now on their agenda is how many plug-ins for the electric vehicle they have. They have over 300 units, and they have only provided for like 7 electric, or some minuscule amount. And I'm just wondering, looking ahead, these are the kind of arcane, you know, catch-22 things that, you know, our grandkids are going to look at us and say, what did you ever get caught up in that stupid discussion for? when people are desperate. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
I'd like to second the idea of government slash private partnership. In another arena, I had the experience of dealing with that as the government, and I worked with the partnership of private, and it was excellent. We got really good results. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ginny?
Just wanted to mention, I was very excited several years ago when we passed the ADU bylaw, and I thought, this is really going to change things. You know, it's ideal for people who have extra space in their home and give them some extra income, and really help with our housing shortage. But so few people have taken advantage of it, and part of the problem is people don't know how to go about it. So the Lower Cape CDP and Homeless Prevention Council just launched this Lower Cape Housing and ADU Resource Center. And they provide information on the permitting process, you know, guide you through the process, what are the zoning regulations. There's even financial incentives. So they're coming to speak at the library on Tuesday, October 18th at 10:30. And I know it's during the day, so, you know, I'd like to have them back some other times. Hopefully, I think they're doing that kind of outreach all over, just starting that, and I think that should be really helpful.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see better results.
Housing assistance is doing the same.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Ginny. Any other comments, questions, or things they had? Go ahead, sir.
Just a couple short ones. The cost of building has gone so ridiculous that being stuck on everything being single home is not ever going to be affordable. I mean, I just renovated a 1,200 square foot home, like $400,000 for my own employee housing, and I already owned it and thought I was just kind of remodeling it. So density of housing and getting the cost per square foot of the house down is going to have to be addressed, and through creative zoning and allowing the commitment of the town to correct and change stumbling block zoning, you know, maybe 42-foot height instead of 30, if you're doing affordable housing. You know, that there needs to be some connection to, you get exemptions from certain zoning if you're doing things that benefit this town, or you'll never afford to build anywhere near the kind of pricing that we're looking for either rent or for sale.
Sure.
It's not fun building today.
And I also want to mark the time that it took this long for the word density to come up, only because that is the big D word,
Yeah.
and it's one of the relevant words for the conversation, for sure, but thank you. Anyone else before Ginny? Ginny for the second time?
Yeah, this one's personal.
Yep, sorry,
I'm
I'm acting like a
second what you
moderator, I
said. I
apologize.
agree. Density, I think, is really important. I personally like living in a village, in a walkable downtown area, and I think that's important to a community, to having the connections with other people. When I moved here 22 years ago, if I had moved here 6 months later, I would not have been able to buy a house. So I raised 3 children. The first 10 years I was a department head in town, we qualified for affordable housing based on my income. My kids are older now, and out of 2 have moved away. I have 1 still in town. So obviously I don't qualify anymore. But all those years of being house poor, I have so much deferred maintenance on my house. So like the smaller homes, condos and townhouses, I've lived in townhouses before. I think those are ideal. And I don't know why there's such a, they seem to have such a negative reputation when we talk about affordable housing, and I think it's perfect. When you're talking about people of low and moderate income and you can't afford all the upkeep on the outside of the home and the yard, that's just really important. You can still provide very nice places to live, variety of, you know, every condo doesn't have to be just a straight block building, variety of shapes and sizes of units, and provide really nice housing, and I hope that we consider some of that.
Thank you. Yep, in the back.
My name is Angelo Kiriakis. I live at 78 Bank Street. I've been hearing all this commentary and everything else. I'm an architect. I've been doing public housing, affordable housing, for 40 years. between Louisiana and Massachusetts. The intent to design an integrated housing within a community to blend with it is an ideal utopian thought. But unless this committee goes out and sees those things that have been developed, because I've gone back to my developments, and they are ghettos in 10 years. They do not sustain themselves. There's no pride of ownership. And it's an outside source. If it's a private developer, they build it and they go away. So the management of it is critical. Is it going to deteriorate the value of abutting communities? Is it going to deteriorate the value of Harwich Port and Harwich itself? There's a lot of questions that this committee and this trust has to resolve. But clearly just building a lot of housing, or 200 units here or 50 units there, this is not a community that sustains that type of thing. We don't live in those developments. We live in single-family communities. We're in neighborhoods. And you really have to look at what your goal is going to be here. I'm not against public housing. I've made my dime on public housing, whether it's federal, state, Hope 6 programs, whatever the different funding agencies are, from ownership, coming in with low-income people for home ownership, so there's a tax base that they contribute back to the community. They're just not taking back. So there's a lot of avenues here, but clearly I think this committee may want to take some road trips and take a look at what some of these things look like, what they were projected to be 20 years ago, what they look like today, and what they've done overall to a community. Some of them are successful, but for the greater part, they're not. I originally came from Brockton, so I'm talking from school. I came up in this piece. I went to school here. I developed public housing for a lot of different public agencies between Brockton, Boston, Lowell, Lynn, Lawrence. It's a utopian thought process, but you've got to live it and you've got to see it. And I'm not happy with the product, what happened to my product 20 years later.
Thank you. Richard.
Great point, and I think that's one of the misnomers about affordable, moderate, and workforce housing. If you look at some of those numbers, a family earning $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year that would qualify for this. If you're going to do a private-public partnership, the key is the oversight. You look at Pine Oaks Village on Oak Street, public housing, low-income housing. It's managed on site. And those projects, I hate to use the word project, but developments that are keeping a local control somehow with the local element involved can forestall something getting bad. The maintenance, the capital cost for a development like that can be maintained. But that's why if we're going to do something, there's got to be that local partnership with it to get that done.
That's true, Richard, but you don't always get to pick the people who go in or control the people who go in. So they bring different pieces or components, and they live differently.
And if you do it with a local partnership, you're working to consider how can we keep local control. If you're giving something to Marceline, you can open a housing list right now. The folks who are doing it in Washington, for instance, okay, when they set up with federal tax credits, they're doing a development down there. And people say, well, we want to have locals in the neighborhood go to that, but we have to open it to everybody. They open that housing list day one. So, but at the time they put the shovel in the ground, they've got a list of 400 people who are local going into that development. What we've got to do is get creative and stay away from the age-old argument we've heard 100 times. It's great to have housing, not in my backyard. This abuts Route 6. This abuts Route 124. There is not a better location to do housing than right here that's going to impact as few other neighbors and neighborhoods than anywhere in town. And I'll look to our friends Davenport. They're doing a subdivision right now on Headwaters Drive, right next to the bike trail. It's gorgeous. They control it. They have someone who checks those houses on a weekly basis. You can do it. I understand the pitfalls.
That's a privately owned. That's absolutely correct.
But that's
privately owned is a different piece.
Town-private partnership is how you can control that. And I think it's imperative that we do it, but we've got to get something done. The housing crisis is right now, we're facing it, and if you look at the shops, look at the restaurants in Howardsport, George's Pizza, closed 1 or 2 days a week. They never closed before. They don't have staff. They don't have housing for staff. I'm a realtor. I'm showing properties to Chatham Bars Inn, Wauquasit, Witchmere, so they can buy housing for their people. It is a crisis, and then they're competing with the local teacher or the local firefighter. We had a local police officer look at a house this weekend. They're competing with some of these major corporations because they need the housing. We've got to deal with it. We have to.
The biggest irony is where we're sitting right now.
Right. Exactly.
We tried a couple of times, a couple ways to make this housing.
No. Yeah.
Now, I have a vested interest. I have a studio downstairs now. I'm really happy with this other vision we've got going. There are things like the fact that it shares a septic system with the elementary school and things like that that would have made it a real challenge to convert it to housing. But the biggest thing that happened was everyone wanted to tell you why they believed in it, but not here. They didn't want, not everyone, some people. And some people said, we don't want those people coming in. And I'm looking going, those people, that's my daughter and my son-in-law. That's the other teachers that I worked with in the schools. The teachers, you know, who used to work here in this building. So it's really kind of funny to be having this forum here tonight. It can be both and. Private partnership, there's reasons for us not taking on another building and another project and having the town own it. But one of the other things is, you know, that I think of as going forward, if there's a rental piece, yes, you have to have somebody there to keep it going and to manage it. And if there's going to be sales, do you want to talk about deed restrictions? Because I know years ago, we put a little project up on Community Way, and it was affordable housing in single-family homes. They neglected the deed restrictions on it, and then when one young family had the ability, back when these used to be starter homes, I don't think a lot of people know what a starter home was. They had the starter home, and then you were going to leverage up to something else, and they sold it and they made money on it, but that wasn't the intent. And they realized, oh, so now it wasn't affordable for the next person coming in. You know, we've been involved in building projects with Habitat. There are ways that you can have that partnership, and we just have to have the vision and the foresight for what do we need to make sure we control before we cede the control over it. Going from how we design it to start, and what we want the aesthetic to look like, and if we want it to be mixed use and mix of rental and purchase, and to, do we want to keep it that way in perpetuity? Because affordable is just going to, you know, it's always going to be there. We're going to need there to be more affordable housing for some. So we can't let people buy parts of it and sell it out, right?
Thank you. Was there a hand up over here, or John?
Yeah, hi everyone. Most of you probably don't know who I am, but my name's John. I bought the Beltec School from the town of Harwich. And so I just want to introduce myself. I had a couple notes. So Bell's Neck is an abandoned building. I paid the town $175,000 for it. I removed the cost of maintenance from the town. I'm going to add new property taxes as soon as I can. I'm saving a historic building, and I'm going to provide year-round housing with the project. So I would say the town, the best thing they can do is identify these properties and market them, and then get them out to, you know, the open markets, or, you know, people like myself to handle this. I don't think the town should be involved in building, developing anything. I don't think they should be managing. I think they should be assisting with the open market to do it. I have a building that's been sitting now for way too long, and my biggest problem is trying to get a permit to build something. If they'd give me a permit, I could build 7 units today, but it's going to take me 6-8 months. And the biggest problem is the hurdles the town has in place to allow me to build it. And hopefully I'll get there. The easiest thing would be to turn it into a single family and sell it for $1 million. But I want to be a contributing member of Harwich. I want to add something, and I want, you know, property I'm going to probably own for 20 years. So if I could just get permitting for year-round housing, we could build it. Your best use of your time is to remove those hurdles for people trying to build housing. I think the affordable stuff is awesome, and I'm hoping to work something out with you guys. And if I can make it work, I'll do it affordable because it's more helpful. But when we talk about, you know, it's too expensive, you know, I mentioned, you know, trying to price it somewhere around $2,000 a month. And I would suggest that anything added to this housing stock helps, because it's one less person that's competing to buy something against other people. So, you know, I can't provide $1,000 apartments, but, you know, providing something is 7 more, you know, properties for somebody to live in. There's a term that I'm starting to use. Someone taught me it's density done right. So density scares people, but if you do it right, it can be charming and kind of culturally appropriate. And I think if you guys were able to, coordinate the oversight, because I understand your point that some projects are going to turn into, maybe things you don't want. But if the town could kind of provide the oversight to make sure these properties stay with somebody that cares, I'm going to own this project probably a lot longer than most people would. And then the last thing is, you guys just revised your multifamily zoning, and I think the planning board oversaw that, and it's probably the best piece of updated zoning I've come across in Massachusetts, and it opens up some doors, which I'm excited to explore. I have another property that's old, and I've had it for a couple years now, and it's too big to rent out, 4 or 5 bedrooms. I can turn that into 2 or 3 smaller units, and it'd be way more affordable. The bill to heat this building is, it's an old 1840s house. It's like $1,500 a month to heat it. There's no reason for it to be this big. So I'm excited to kind of explore, adding density in places that's appropriate. And I think your best bet is these small 3 to 10 unit properties. So I'm kind of excited for some of the stuff you guys are changing, and I'm happy to help or answer any questions I can. That's kind of it.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
I just want
And
to
of course,
say-
I'm going to choose a member of the board.
I just want to say, so much of what everybody is talking about the immediate future of housing, is relating back to density and zoning changes. So I'm asking everybody in this room to continue to be aware and listen and attend meetings, because that is a huge discussion in town. And what happens is, when people aren't listening all along through the year what we're talking about, it blows up at town meeting. And that's a problem. So to try to make any kind of, headway here, people need to be engaged, they need to attend, whether it's online or come to the meetings, because you raise a lot of great points, as did so many other people here. Density does scare people, but if done right, it can address a lot of the issues that we're all talking about here tonight. But we can't just talk about them tonight. People need to remain engaged, they need to attend or watch online and participate in that conversation, because it can't just come into May and it blows up, because that's what happens.
Thank you. There's a lot more that can be said. So I will say come back on Tuesday, November 1st, when we do this again, and say it again. Before we break up, first of all, again, thank you to Caleb Ledoux from Channel 18 for taping for us. Folks, as your town administrator, thank you, Caleb. I won't do anything without input, because I need to hear from the community, and I know the trust members will say the same thing.
Can I just say one thing? If you go back and you watch our meetings, you will see that there's consensus on the board that if any of this is sold, it will absolutely be deed restricted. There should be no question about that.